Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. I've had the odd comment recently asking for an update on various vehicles, on the Capri, on the bike, etc, etc. So I thought I'd just give you guys a bit of a quick update on where I am with the Capri today. As you've probably seen in some of the previous videos, the main issue I've been having with it, or have decided to tackle recently, is some of the rust underneath. So most of this video today is going to be about how I've got on with that. Before I get on to that though, one of my most recent activities has been, after having the car put away for a long winter, I decided to start the thing up and make sure it runs okay. All I'd really done during the winter, which was a very cold one this year, was charge the battery every so often. It's not on a trickle charger. I just use, actually it's down here, I just use a standard old school battery charger, put it on low charge overnight every month or so, and it seemed to keep the battery alive that way. I was expecting it not to really start very well because there's probably been quite a lot of old fuel stuck in the carbs and in the fuel lines, so I was dreading trying to get it running, to be honest. Also, I'd removed the main fuel line as part of the work I'm doing. If you go right the way to the back, I've removed the old fuel line, which was pretty old, and it goes up under the wheel arch and along the bottom of the car where it had been squashed in places, and not damaged, but definitely in need of replacement. One of the things you can see if you actually look underneath here, this bracket here was originally pancaked completely flat, and the fuel line goes through the middle of it and onto the engine, so I was surprised that it was running at all actually. I've managed to straighten it with various pliers and hammers. It's still in a pretty poor condition though, and I think I'll need to rip it off and replace it with a new part. It did look like the car had been maybe picked up with a forklift truck at one point, because these sills were all a bit dented as well and just squashed the whole thing flat. But I straightened that. I bought myself a new fuel line off eBay, connected it from one end and just run the other end up to the feed to the carburetors. And after a bit of fettling and priming, it started and ran straight away. It ran very well. I ran the car for about half an hour just to make sure it was all running and getting it up to temperature. So I was really chuffed with that I didn't have to clean out the carbs or anything like that. One thing to bear in mind though is with the engine in its current state of tune, with a very fast road cam and the two side draft 45 carbs and various other bits and pieces that have been done to it, it's been bored out to 2.1 litres and various other things, it's not the sort of car that you can turn the key from freezing cold, have it run and idle perfectly, and then drive fine, and then thrash it like a race car. What I found is it's a bit of a compromise now. In order to get it idle at a decent RPM when the engine's hot and up to temperature, it means it is quite rough to start. So you have to prime the fuel quite a bit and then kind of get the revs up for quite a while until the engine gets hot enough to idle by itself. It's kind of not so bad if you're going to take it out and drive it straight away, but if you're going to sit with it on the drive, it does take quite a bit of fettling. And I've spent quite a long time adjusting the mixture with the main mixture screw to try and get that balanced, which I think I've managed to achieve now. So on to the metalwork side now then. There hasn't been a lot of progress, but I have learnt an awful lot over the last 6 months or so. Whereas this all used to be quite rusty metal, I've stripped most of it back, ground off the rust as much as I can with a grinder, coated it with some rust killer, and then coated it with some paint on, just primer, sort of anti-rust primer there. Most of the welding here you can see is old welding that was done before I had the car, so all I've done is treated it and coated it ready for painting. The underside has been a real challenge. There's so much underseal on here and filler that, as you can see, even now I'm probably only about halfway through it, and getting into these corner bits is really difficult. I've been using a mixture of chisels, attachments for the grinder, flap discs and all sorts of things, and it's been a real graft. I think I'm getting there, but it's still going to be quite a few hours in getting this stuff out of the corners. And what I'm dreading is I'm only on one side of the car. I haven't even looked at the other side yet. It's likely to be at least as bad as this side. The rust overall, in general, is not too bad. All this stuff you can see that I've painted didn't have much surface rust at all. The main problem though is there's almost not a single panel without some form of damage to it. As you can see here, there's like a reinforcement panel which is around the inner wing where the battery box is, and there's a big rust patch here. This is where water and salt water enters into the top, works its way down, and then sits between the two panels and then just corrodes like a blister. This kind of happens everywhere on this car. It's the same on this reinforcement plate here, that although the panel in general is in good condition, it just takes a bit of water to seep between the two at the top, and then it busts out from the inside and damages both panels. Another thing is the coilovers, which I'm a little disappointed in because these are pretty new. These haven't had much use, and already the powder coating's almost gone from them. I do get comments on quite a few of my videos about the sort of rust on my vehicles, and I think perhaps part of it is perhaps where I live, where there's a lot of snow in the winter and a lot of salt on the roads. It really does attack these vehicles any way it can. But onto the progress now side of things. As I said at the beginning, I haven't done a huge amount of work on the car this year, but what I have done is a lot of preparation and a lot of learning. So I've been working on building up my sort of metal working area. As you can see, I've got various tools here, and I've been learning how to use them and lay them out. Got myself this awesome kind of column mounted vise off eBay, which is really handy. I had to even had to restore this though before I could use it, as it was kind of completely jammed and wasn't unwinding very smoothly. So I had to take it completely apart, replace the spring in it, and replace various bits and re-grease it all again. But it is pretty handy to have now that I've got that. You can see on my channel I've done a separate video reviewing welders. That's been a real learning curve for me, not knowing anything about welding at all. I started off by buying the gasless MIG welder over there, the flux core one. Think it'd be a nice cheap way to get into welding. Looked into a few videos on YouTube that said yes, you can use flux core welders for working on cars. As I said in my previous review video, I don't find that to be the case at all. They're just not kind of finessed enough to work on really thin sheet metal. So that's going to be sold as soon as I got round to it. And I bought this Clark Pro 90 MIG welder, which is much better for thin sheet steel. This has kind of been an evolutionary process as well. The welder came with the basic welder, and I think you can see it down here, a CO2 bottle with a little regulator that comes with it. And with that, I actually managed to achieve quite a lot. I've repaired the headlamp bowl, as you can see. This was basically a hole here, and the metal was almost paper thin, so I didn't think I'd be able to repair that. But with a lot of little spot welds with this little welder and CO2 bottle, that has been repaired really nicely. It's really solid now, and I found it quite an easy process when you get the hang of it, of making templates out of cardboard, cutting the steel with tin snips, and then just kind of tacking it into place and then trimming it. For these more simpler panel shapes, it's quite an easy process. You can see on the inside there some of the welds on the inside, so I've managed to not have to replace this headlamp bowl, which is nice because they're not the cheapest things. But just back onto the welder briefly. The latest progress on that is I've finally managed to get hold of some gas. This is a 95% argon mix, I think. Argon CO2 mix, it is the most recommended gas for home welding. It's not the cheapest. It cost me nearly £140, I think, for the bottle and gas. Although if I'm to get a refill, it's less than £40 for the refill. So most of the money is in the gas itself. And I've rigged up this regulator, which I bought from Machine Mart, with the welder. So I haven't used this gas yet. I'm really looking forward to it because from everything I've read, it should give an even better result than the CO2 I've been using. It has surprised me though with learning to weld that I kind of went down this road as a money-saving way for not having to use body shops. It probably is going to be cheaper than body shops in the long run, but it's not cheap by any means. The welder itself, I think, was £250. Then when you add in the regulator, the gas, you find that you need all sorts of other bits and pieces like gloves, a mask, welding clamps. You of course need to buy the metal itself. It's not by any means a cheap thing to do. I've probably spent £500 or £600 on welding stuff. Even down to, I thought I had the gas bottle, and then I realised I needed to get a trolley for it as well, because if you just had the gas bottle separately or chained up to a wall, it felt like it was going to fall over, which I didn't want to happen. Back onto the Capri then. So all these repairs down the bottom, this is my handiwork. So you might love this, you might laugh at it, but this has been me really learning how to do it. So this top bit here was done with a flux core welder. There's a lot of little holes in it. It's not very good. But then you can see down the bottom, this is where I moved on to the standard MIG welder, which has been much easier to get these little welds on here. There's still a few holes. I need to use some seam sealer on here and a bit of filler. I might even grind some of the paint off and touch it up a bit more of the welder. You can see here the gaps don't quite line up properly, so I've got to fix that. And this panel section was very difficult to replicate. The original, this panel kind of comes around and smoothly joins the panel. The best I've managed to do is kind of weld in a flat piece there and then attach that to the bottom panel there. A choice I did have was, you can get most of the panels for the Capri now from places like Express Steel Panels or various other suppliers. I think you can get them through Capri Club, through Tickover, and there's another major panel supplier that does them, and the prices do vary quite a bit. For example, you can get this whole panel here, which I think for less than £100. Generally at the moment I've decided to just try and fabricate little repairs rather than buy whole new panels, and this is kind of for two reasons. One of them is the cost of the panels. If I was to buy all new panels everywhere, it's going to set me back quite a bit. And also time. The time to unpick all the old panels, take the doors off, it's quite involved, whereas at the moment it feels like, for me, it's easier just to make little patch repairs here and there. As I touched on earlier though, there are some panels which I probably will decide to buy, such as the reinforcement under here, which as you can see is completely battered, and as it's a sort of structural strengthening part, I probably want that to be in a decent state. So overall then, lots of work to do, but I'm feeling quite good about it at the moment. Now that I've finally got all my tools sorted out, I think with a bit of work, with these warm summer evenings, it shouldn't take too long to finish a lot of this work, and I'll learn quite a lot in the process. So I'll try and keep these videos coming and showing you the progress as they go. Hope you found that interesting. If you did and you want to see more of this, give me a like and a subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.